should never have hurt you. I've said those things.
I, I, I don't know what to say other than after years and years of countless announcements and fan theories, news, TikTok videos, speculation, and then confirmation, rescheduling, endless wait, and mountain piling of hype, and it's finally hit. Spider-Man No Way Home, welcome to the MCU, or should I say, MCU, welcome to the multiverse, the Spider-Verse. Look man, there's so much to talk about with this movie, and I literally just had my second viewing a couple days ago. Well, at least from the time I'm recording this, or more like when I wrote this script, but without wasting any time, let's get right into the video and discuss some Spider-Man, or Spider-Man, I don't know, we'll see. And yes, beware, this video will contain spoilers, because frankly there's no way you can talk about it without spoiling it. But anyways, as always, please like and subscribe, hit that notification bell, and let's go! Alright, so as expected, the movie kicks off right after that cliffhanger from Far From Home, where Peter's identity is revealed to the world, and immediately he and MJ are on the run. Like literally within the first minute and a half of the movie, people are hunting them down and getting into helicopters looking for them, throwing bricks at their windows, just like the trailers advertised. And so you just can't help but feel like they're constantly in danger, both Peter and his loved ones, which is obviously a plus. It was also interesting to see just how badly this stuff has affected Peter, MJ and Ned, because even their careers are permanently impacted, as we're told 15 minutes or so into the movie that they've failed to get into MIT. And yeah, I also love how they included Daredevil in this movie, except I haven't seen Daredevil yet, and so unfortunately it didn't mean as much to me as most other fans, but nonetheless, fan service is fan service. But yeah, everything about this first act was totally brilliant for me. I felt like it perfectly established the movie's tone and was a very nice concept where a hero as iconic yet private as Spider-Man has his most important value leaked to the whole world, and the way it played out on screen was pretty much exactly what I wanted. The only things I didn't particularly approve of, but at the same time didn't really care about in this first kind of half hour is, well, A, I felt like the pacing was definitely a little too quick, at least to begin with, and B, I do feel like some of the songs that played during the sequence gave off too much of a light-hearted and positive tone relative to the scene it's portraying, but nonetheless, I was really happy with this first act and it most definitely kept me intrigued for more. What I think the movie, more specifically this first half hour, did so well is showing us just how much this incident messed up Peter's life. As I was saying, not only was he and his friends rejected from MIT, however he's also in severe danger from the public, and so are his loved ones. Not only does this make the scene where he enters school all the more entertaining, but it also makes Mysterio 100 times better as a villain. Having something Peter does and is directly responsible for is exactly what makes him responsible for what happens to his loved ones. And you all know what responsibility goes with.
With great power comes great responsibility.
And thus, when Peter goes to Doctor Strange and asks him for a little help, you do understand why he's doing this and what he's going through. So yes, as shown in the trailers, Peter and Doctor Strange indeed disobey Wong and perform the forbidden spell so everyone forgets Peter is Spider-Man. And I saw some people complaining about how Peter kept on pleading with Strange about some people still remembering when the trailer first came out. But really, all this does is show us just how much room he has to grow as a character in this movie, which we'll get to a little later. So yes, as predicted, the spell messes up and it's here where the doorways for the Sam Raimi and Andrew Garfield villains respectively are opened. So let's talk a bit about them first, starting with Alfred Molina as Dr. Octopus.
Hello, Peter.
Now, Doc Ock was one of the most heavily featured villains in both the trailers, however none of that takes away even a fraction from how exciting it was to see him reappear again. Right from the get-go, I found Doc Ock to be pretty much a perfect character, as he feels like the exact same guy from Spider-Man 2. Really. The lines of dialogue and the sort of quips they give him is precisely the kind you'd expect from the original. I particularly liked that part where he tears off a part of the Iron Spider suit and compliments Peter for supposedly figuring out nanotechnology, before literally absorbing the nanobots in his tentacles like a boss. See, these are the exact sort of things you'd expect a science nerd like Otto to say. That combined with the top-notch acting from Alfred Molina. Really, the actors playing these villains deserve most of the credit for how great their characters turn out to be. Without them, they would literally be worthless and nothing short of cheap remakes. I'm not even joking when I say this is like a Heath Ledger Joker thing, because honestly, that's how much these actors carry their villains. Mark my words, Alfred Molina was so good at playing his role I was honestly sold on the idea that this was the exact same Doc Ock from 17 years ago. And the same can be said for Green Goblin. Goblin was another villain I was particularly looking forward to seeing again since I was a huge fan of Willem Dafoe's character in the Raimi movies, and I'm glad to report that he's nothing short of a great villain here as well, arguably the best one in fact. Not only is Willem Dafoe's performance as the Goblin absolutely amazing and terrifying, but he also does a reassuring job at truly making you believe that Norman is this innocent and victimized man who genuinely means no harm, that he's a victim of the Goblin's mind control. I love the scene where Norman, Doc Ock and all the other villains are like helping Peter out in the lab constructing these antidote serums or something, and seeing Norman and Otto's kind and intellectual sides kick in was such a refresher, and I'm glad they remembered that. I also loved how when Sandman first shows up during the Electro fight, he initially helps Peter because the last thing he recalls is them being friends, and so to see him maintain that trust offers yet more credibility to the fact that these are in fact the same characters from the original movies. Speaking of Electro, I was also really impressed with what they did with him. Initially when I first saw his new design in the trailers, I wasn't all that impressed if I'm being honest. I thought it looks too bland and uninspired, but upon watching the movie I got used to this new design, and certainly Jamie Foxx's very different character compared to last time. I mean, it works on most paths though. He's certainly a much more charismatic and enjoyable character now compared to before, and his Yellow Lightning was actually pretty cool to see in action. Plus, I did think it works to have him as the kind of comedic relief character in the Sinister Six, just because Jamie Foxx is pretty good at playing that part. But yeah, seeing all these villains reappear on the silver screen after so many years and actually interact with each other and share their different experiences with Spider-Man, or even just themselves, it was just so satisfying to watch it all on screen. Another thing I noticed whilst watching the movie is how they actually managed to find a feasible way to explain why all the villains are now suddenly back and alive again, and why certain characters like Doc Ock are acting really weird. And it's basically because they all came back from the exact moment they discovered Peter is Spider-Man, or in Electro's case it was just before he died. And watching them all slowly start to realise what's going on and what happened back in their old universes really brought me into the movie more. I was also a huge fan of the way Doc Ock remained a hero in disguise during the final battle rather than a full-on villain, because as I said in my video a couple weeks ago, his redemption arc should not be ruined or ignored, and gladly it wasn't. Also, shout out to the musical team for including the original villain themes. You may not notice it the first time you see the film, however they do actually include little snippets of the original scores for pretty much all the villains, and so that was pretty amazing as well. But what I think the movie does most effectively is bringing together the team and making them likeable, because you can't have a good team of villains if they don't work with each other, but fortunately they do, and for most of the movie they're really likeable and fun to be around. That being said, when the time comes for these villains to turn evil and fight Peter, well, mark my words, they are every ounce as menacing as they needed to be. Goblin in particular was definitely as scariest and most lethal in this movie compared to anywhere else in the Raimi trilogy, and the part where he went full on beast mode at Peter and killed Aunt May was what really established him as the powerhouse of the team for me. Even so, I did still really like the way Peter wants to help these villains and return them to their original universes rather than letting them perish, which not only leads to a spectacular chase scene where Peter actually uses maths to beat magic, but in general this is just such a Spider-Man thing to do. It feels like Spider-Man, putting others before yourself. And combined with this, I was overall really impressed with the stuff they did with Tom Holland's Spider-Man in this movie. They essentially give us an origin story for this version of Peter, except it's not the usual Uncle Ben dies, with great power comes great responsibility, blah blah blah. Because for this Peter, none of that actually happened. I mean, it is pretty much the same, but with Aunt May's death instead of Uncle Ben. However, the lessons she teaches Peter and the amount of character development given to him really shocked me of how much of it there was. Compared to the previous two MCU Spider-Man installments, No Way Home offers the most character growth for Peter by a milestone. That's not even close. In fact, I'd even compare it to that of Spider-Man 2 Into the Spider-Verse, of how good of a Spider-Man story is told here. Peter and MJ's relationship is also an additional factor which the movie actually does pretty well, at least compared to other Spider-Man films. And Zendaya certainly was the right match for Tom if you ask me, and Ned is also a fun side character. But out of every character besides Peter, Aunt May definitely had the most justice done to her, and she really was the prime motivator for Peter, basically his Uncle Ben. Now the real question everyone was asking going into this movie is, will Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield actually show up in the first live-action Spider-Verse movie, as we've all been speculating for years now? And boy were those rumours damn right. Now let me just say right now that I don't even care about the rest of the movie. These two just showing up in the movie, combined with the Sinister Six, is already enough for me to give it an automatic, 7 or 8 out of 10. But flooding all those glorified references, soundtracks, and frickin' memes from the previous movies and there you have something straight out of my dreams. Literally. I cannot even begin to express just how excited I was or how overwhelmed I was by nostalgia when I saw Tobey, Andrew, and Tom discussing what it's like to be Spider-Man and what sort of consequences that privilege comes with, which loved ones they have lost. I liked how Tom was the only one who had experience at being part of a team and that he was educating the other two. I like how Andrew is still very much overwhelmed by grief and regret. I loved how they included that discussion about the web shooters, which everyone's been trending all over TikTok. Literally everything they did with this concept was just 100% perfect to me. They took a concept very much invented by the fans and made it into exactly what we all asked for. I know like 90% of this movie is just plain fan service, but I honestly don't care. Seeing the very memes we all made on the internet be put to the big screen was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Seeing Tobey and Andrew swinging alongside Tom whilst they each battle their own foes, or in some cases someone else's, was absolutely magnificent. And I really loved that part where Tom was about to finish off Goblin, but then Tobey steps in and stops him because he doesn't want vengeance to consume Tom the same way it did with him in Spider-Man 3. Likewise, when Andrew stepped in and saved MJ, it was like my prayers were answered. No, literally. Remember that video I made a couple weeks ago where I talked about 5 things we have to see in No Way Home? Well, guess what? They did happen. All of them. Number 1. Make the Sinister Six work as a team. Check. Number 2. Peter Parker should make his own suit rather than a Stark Tech one. Check. Number 3. Restore Doc Ock and Sandman's redemption arcs. Check. Number 4. Andrew should save MJ instead of Tom. Check. Number 5. Don't ruin the Sinister Six. Check. See, when the biggest movie of 2021 manages to answer all 5 of your fan theories and requests, you know it's a banger. Not to mention, they also managed to find a way to leave Strange out of the final battle, just as I said they should at the end of my video. The action and special effects throughout the entire movie was also great. I was a huge fan of the fast-paced action style, particularly during the bridge fight with Doc Ock, and the visual effects in the final battle were, as expected, typical MCU level, aka great. One thing to point out when talking about the action is that they surprisingly raised the brutality levels of it, and actually had Tom Spidey throwing proper punches at his villains, which is something the MCU has been holding back with for a while now. And I was also especially surprised to see a comparatively darker tone compared to the previous 2 movies, especially seeing how the MCU typically sticks to a more kid-friendly tone when it comes to Spider-Man, but for once they actually changed, and I'm glad. And I will forever hold on to my opinion that the ending was by far and away one of the best endings to a superhero movie I've seen in a long shot, since Infinity War. Peter Parker returning to his shitty apartment with no one to live with, no one to take care of him, slipping into his very own crime-fighting costume and swinging around the streets of New York doing the job solo. That is Spider-Man to me. That is the Spider-Man we know from the comics, from the Raimi trilogy, and the one we always wanted. So in summary, do I think this is the best Spider-Man movie of all time? Yes, just yes. Although I definitely acknowledge that Into the Spider-Verse and the first 2 Raimi films bring in some tight competition. And especially when you take into account that No Way Home pretty much makes all the previous Spider-Man films and characters better, you can see where I'm coming from. So I'm going to go ahead and give this movie a straight 10 out of 10. Plot is engaging, villains are dope, action is great, side characters are decent, tells one of the best Spider-Man stories put to screen, Spider-Man references and fan services check, Tobey and Andrew yes, just absolutely fantastic beginning to end. Brilliant Spider-Man movie and brilliant MCU movie. However, I still do prefer Avengers Infinity War personally out of the 2, making No Way Home my second favourite MCU movie and my favourite Spider-Man movie. And by the way, while I was personally a little let down by Venom's non-existence in the movie, because frankly that post-credit scene did get me really hyped, seeing the symbiote get left behind definitely leaves the doorways open for a possible symbiote storyline with Tom Holland's Spider-Man, so I guess we'll just have to wait and see. So comment below and let me know what you thought of No Way Home. Did it live up to the hype or was it just a wasted potential? Also, please remember to subscribe to the channel and switch on notifications, since now that we have this banger out, y'all should expect a dozen more scaling and ranking videos. Alright, catch you next time.